Hi there! How's it going? It's me again. How are you? I hope everyone's well. Tonight's episode is another of my series on Mystara, the Known World, where I talk about Gazetteer number 3, Principalities of Glantri. Let's start with the basics. I previously talked about the first two, Yularum, the Emirates of Yularum, and the Grand Duchy of Karamikos. Both of those had a very distinct theme to them, a very distinct sort of cultural touchstones to draw on. Glantri is, it has a lot of things that are a little different. And I'm going to try and go over a few of them. First, it was written by Bruce Hurd. He was the head of development for several products with TSR. He was writing it on a freelance basis for them at the time. And he is famous, among other things, for writing the Voyage of the Princess arc, which is a series of stories in Dragon magazine that explored more details about Mystara. So there's that. Now, let me start off by saying that this has not been my favorite Gazetteer so far. Mainly because it lacks that consistent feel to it. That sort of... It's much more of a hodgepodge vision of Glantri. This is not to say I dislike it, but that is a little bit off-putting. It's hard for me to sort of say this is, as well written as it could be. And, again, we're talking about early days, about writing cultures for games. And there are several things I really do like about it, so I'm going to try and talk about it. Now, first things first, the overall themes on, how the culture is structured, like I said, is very hodgepodge. There is certainly a feel of an Italian city-state to it, particularly in the city of Glantri itself. And the way they structure by, leadership by Council of Princes felt very Italian to me. And a lot of the art supports that view. There's, stories of people going around on punting on the little gondolas around the city. And it felt very like Venice, and there's a lot of stuff there. Mixed in there is a range of other cultures. Strangely, there's some Scottish elements, there's some French elements, and some vaguely Mongol-esque elements, all mixed in there. Plus some stuff that reminds me very much of sort of the hidden cultures that you sometimes read about in some of the pulp action adventures in the 1930s. In particular, there is an element, the element that feels very French is, it gets convoluted. The Amberville, or d'Amberville, noble family, is from an adventure called Castle Amber. They are from, and that was in turn based on the works of Clark Ashton Smith, and was supposed to be in a world that sort of tied to the world he created. And Clark Ashton Smith was a contemporary of H.P. Lovecraft. Wrote a lot of mythos horror. Now, Bruce Hurd took elements from Castle Amber and put them into Glantri because reasons. He liked them, he wanted to add them. So there's new d'Amberville in there. There's some Scottish culture stuff that got pulled in with it. It's odd. It doesn't actually none of that really fits together all that much. And even the overall history of the book is got odd hodgepodge of things going on. And one of the other reasons that it's weird is that this is the first time where you really begin to get a piece of the Blackmoor setting in Mystara, because one of the major elements, one of the major story pieces, almost a MacGuffin of the Principalities of Glantri, is a item that was from the fall of Blackmoor. It was a machine of great power that emits a radiation. It's a starship. It's a starship that crashed back in the age of Blackmoor and got converted to use, and the radiation now gives extra magical power, and it affects much of the history as a result of the nation is affected by that radiation. The Radiance is what it's called. Now, as far as how the book is structured, it's a little different than the structure of the previous two, but it does break things up into, sections. Here's about the economy and what have you. It does include in-character bits to sort of carry you through it, and actually I like those. And in fact, good portions of the history sections in the book, and most of the sections actually have through-line stories of somebody explaining something about the world, or showing something about the world. And I like that. I respect that decision. It was a good choice. It definitely makes it feel a little more lived in, a little more realistic. Now you get details about the different princes and their lands, how the council works. You get some details about guilds and factions and organizations. It sort of approaches giving rules for them, but not quite. It's more of here's how you structure describing these groups. So you have a standardized structure for describing groups. It doesn't really describe things in a, how you would do this mechanically, or, what particular benefit these groups give the PCs, but it gives you at least an organized way of looking at the information. One of the things out of that I didn't much care for, there are a couple of Elven Groups. One's called Elf, and the other one's called Fairy, and those are acronyms. And yeah, they're silly. They're just silly. They're there to be silly. You have to accept that going in. It's there to be silly. There's some talk about Thieves Guild stuff, and, merchant guilds, and, a lot of political information about how the different principalities interact with each other. There's a principality that is mostly undead, so that's not great. And one of the big political realities of this land, Glantri, is it's a magocracy, which is to say, mages are the only ones allowed to have power, political power, and everyone else is kind of a second-class citizen. Now, there are a myriad explanations for, how that would work. In this particular case, it's sort of, if you're not a mage, you're sort of oppressed, but you're still useful, so they keep you around. It's kind of weird. They give a lot of detail about the city of Glantri itself. And actually, I really like that part of the book. I think that is probably the most satisfying part of the book. is the details about the city of Glantri. And they talk about it in a sort of, here's the different groups and things that you can find in these different sections of the city. And it with enough hints of how you might use this in an adventure to make it easy on the game master. Comes with a nice big map and everything like that. Now, it also talks about the School of Magic, which is also found there. And of course, the School of Magic is built over the source of the Radiance. So that's fun. I'm sure nothing bad ever happens because of that. Right. Anyways, let's see. Detailed about the Merchant Prince, political faction. Oh, yes. It added some rules. Now, this one, because it is so mage-focused, it is not all that surprising that the rules that they add are related to mages. Specifically, they add some rules for creating spells and creating magic items. These rules are a little rough, I'm not going to lie, but they're not terrible. They're certainly not the worst I've ever seen. And it basically boils down to spending time and money to get an effect. Which there are issues with in tabletop games, but a good DM will be able to work it out and make it work pretty well. The other major set of rules is actually how to use the Radiance as a rules effect thing, and the different kinds of secret magic crafts that are pursued in Glantri. Like I said, it's not surprising that it's got these expanded magical rules for a setting that is focused on being mages. Like, it says in several points in the campaign advice, it's your goal in playing in this area is probably to be able to learn the magic of the Radiance and use that to great effect, and eventually go on to immortality or what have you. So, like I said, it's not surprising that that gets a lot of detail. Now, they also added, unlike the previous two Gazetteers, they actually brought in some monster stats, some creature stats. Not a lot, just enough to, here's something that you might want to use, and here's another thing that you might want to use, and here's another thing. Nothing like a major threat or anything. Just sort of here's the stats on an imp, and things like that. They give a really, really long list of adventure hooks for all levels. And the way they have them presented is, here's the hook, here's how you would structure that, and what things you would use in there, and here's a level range for that. And the hook is usually like, here's a little story bit. Here's a little story bit. Done in an in-character voice. Again, I like that. I think that worked well for those. Not all of the adventure ideas were good. I read them all, and not all of them were good. But there were a lot of them, and there were so many, in fact, that if you didn't like one, you could probably switch over to another in the same level range, because it had that many in there. And it was good sort of jumping off points. And that's really what you want from a book of this type. It also included a write-up on running a graduation ceremony from the School of Magic, which is to say your final tests to prove that you're awesome enough to be a wizard, I guess. And that's all right. It didn't blow the doors off, but it was respectable. I enjoyed it. Let's see, what else? Okay. To sort of sum up, because they also add a section at the end talking about how different countries view people from different countries view Glantri. And here's a problem with the Gazetteers in general so far. That section is completely different in the presentation in how the other two did it. Each of them had their own way of presenting those, so there wasn't a consistent theme. You wouldn't look consistently in the same space. They wouldn't be presented consistently in the same way. So you have a hard time sort of knowing where to look for those things. Also, and this is probably my biggest complaint with this Gazetteer, there are a number of sections where they just say, go look this up in this adventure. Now, some of these adventures are not in print. Now, at the time that this came out, I'm sure they still were, but now they're not. And it makes it hard to sort of do stuff with those particular elements. Because he didn't, it's not a huge book, so he didn't actually cover most of what you would have found out in the background information of those adventures. He just said, go look at them. And that's problematic if you want to make use of this, especially if you want to make use of it now. But even if they were in print, it would be kind of hard to go through a bunch of adventures just to figure out, the background of this particular section of the nation. It is a convoluted sort of hodgepodge nation. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't have a consistent theme. That said, it does have a lot of adventure potential. They have so many adventure hooks just tossed in there that I couldn't describe them all if I wanted to. It's got lots of classic D&D stuff there. It's got that Radiance thing, which is a tie back to the classic science fantasy stuff that a lot of the early D&D guys really loved. So it's sort of a hodgepodge of things, and I like it, but I don't like it as much as I liked some of the previous two Gazetteers. I thought that they were more tightly organized and more tightly themed. And I suspect I probably would have liked it more if I had played the adventures he was referencing before reading it. That's another big thing. I feel like this was more of a, here's a thing to supplement those things that you've already read, rather than, here's a thing to get you started, and then, if you're interested in some more information, go read those. Structurally, it felt different. It felt the other way around. That said, still worth reading, still enjoyable, still something that you should check out. Now, this one is still available on RPG Now and D&D Classics, so you can go find it there. And if you're a budget gamer, that's probably your best choice because it's like $5. You can find it on Noble Knight and eBay, closer to $30, $35, depending on the condition of the version that they have. So, you have those options there. And I will include links in the show notes to places where you can find it, because, some people might want that. Next up will be the next Gazetteer, Gaz 4, Gaz4, The Kingdom of Arendi. And I will get to that in the next couple of weeks, I think. And then I'll get into the one that comes after that, Elfheim. That's right, elves, baby. Which in D&D Basic was a different experience than it was in AD&D and modern Dungeons and Dragons that you may have recognized. I hope you like this. Let me know. Let me know if you disagree with me on my assessment of Glantri. Some people might. Could happen. And because, I may always be right, but, that happens. Nothing. I got nothing. Anyways, I'm going to wrap this up. I hope you liked it, and I look forward to talking to you again. Subscribe, like, share with all the people. The usual caveats apply. And, don't do anything I wouldn't do. That really doesn't narrow things down, actually. I should go.